Do you think you already know all the horror stories that exist? Maybe you've gotten used to scary movies and ghost stories, believing that nothing can truly scare you anymore. But what if I told you that urban legends from Korea are unlike anything you've heard before? They aren't just stories to entertain or frighten, they are reflections of deep fears, the kind that make your heart race when you're alone. They evoke sensations that make you feel like something is watching you in the darkness, ready to attack. Here's an uncomfortable truth. While in the West it's easy to dismiss fear by thinking it's just a story, in Korea these legends carry much more weight. For many, they aren't just simple fictions, but real warnings, messages that have been passed down from generation to generation. It may seem hard to believe, but these stories are taken very seriously, especially in small towns. Now, if you think you're ready for this, I suggest you put on your headphones, turn off the lights, and wrap yourself up tightly in your blanket. Let's begin. In Korea, Chuseok is one of the most important festivals, a time when families gather to honor their ancestors with food offerings and ceremonies called chari. It's a tradition that has been passed down from generation to generation, connecting the living with the dead in a sacred bond of respect and remembrance. But there's a story, a legend that few dare to tell, about what can happen when this tradition is neglected. Many years ago, in a small village in the mountains, there lived a family that always followed the Chuseok traditions to the letter. The village was isolated, surrounded by dense forests and mountains that seemed to whisper ancient secrets. The weather during Chuseok was always misty, making the shadows of the trees dance sinisterly under the light of the full moon. Young Jisoo, 19 years old, was known for being skeptical. He was tired of the old superstitions his family followed so religiously. That year, he decided he wouldn't participate in the ceremonies. He preferred to spend the festival with friends, leaving behind the altar that his ancestors so deeply revered. His parents, already elderly, warned him several times, reminding him that the spirits of the ancestors might feel dishonored. But Jisoo laughed, dismissing the old beliefs. On the night of Chuseok, while the village was steeped in silence, Jisoo felt a sudden and inexplicable unease. He was alone at home, lying in bed, when he began to hear a faint whisper coming from outside. The sound was distant, but it carried a deep tone of lament, as if someone was crying in the darkness. Thinking it might be the wind or some nocturnal animal, Jisoo tried to ignore it, but the whisper persisted, getting closer and closer, clearer and clearer. He decided to get up and look out the window. The full moon illuminated the yard, but what he saw made him freeze with fear. There was a figure standing there in the middle of the yard, with its head bowed. It was wrapped in a dense fog that seemed to twist around it. The biting cold of that night seemed to increase as the figure became more defined. Even from afar, Jisoo could see that the figure was dressed in old-fashioned clothes, similar to what his ancestors wore in old family photos. Dread took hold of him when the figure slowly raised its head, revealing a face without eyes, but with an open mouth from which the lamenting sound he heard was coming. Jisoo stumbled back, tripping and falling to the floor. When he got up, the figure was no longer there. Panicked, he ran to his parents' room, but only found emptiness. The silence in the house was deafening. Desperate, he ran through the rooms but found no signs of anyone. The panic turned into absolute horror when he realized he was completely alone. The sound of the lament returned, now inside the house, echoing through the walls. Jisoo followed the sound, his heart pounding, until he reached the room where the Chuseok altar should have been set up. The altar was empty except for a single lit candle that hadn't been there before. Trembling, Jisoo approached, and in the reflection of the flame, he saw the figure again, now right behind him. Before he could react, he felt cold hands grabbing his shoulders, and a low, angry voice whispered in his ear, "You forgot us." The candle went out, and darkness consumed everything. In that darkness, Jisoo felt as if he was being dragged into a bottomless abyss, a void where time and space no longer existed. The next morning, the villagers found the houses silent. His parents were asleep in their beds, as if nothing had happened, but Jisoo was never seen again. They say the spirit of the ancestor took him away as punishment for his disobedience and lack of respect. Since then, in the village, no one dares to break the Chuseok tradition, fearing the same fate might befall them if they forget to honor those who came before. The whispers that Jisoo heard that night are still mentioned in whispers. They say it's a warning that the dead never forget. It was a quiet night at school, and Sunri, along with some friends, decided to stay late studying in the library. Sunri was a dedicated student, known for her intelligence and determination. It was around 10 p.m., and only the library was lit. The rest of the school was completely dark, with moonlight streaming in through the windows, casting long, unsettling shadows on the floor. Sunri was focused on her books, immersed in her studies, but suddenly felt an irresistible urge to go to the bathroom. She had ignored this urge for a while, but now it seemed urgent, almost as if something was pushing her to leave the library. She told her friends she would quickly go to the bathroom and be right back. They continued studying, not paying much attention to her as she left. Shortly after Sunri left, the friends who stayed in the library began to hear a strange noise, like someone softly tapping on the glass outside. At first, they thought it was just a normal noise, maybe the wind or a stray animal, but the tapping continued, rhythmic, as if it wanted to catch their attention. One of the students, known for being braver, decided to take a look. When he opened the library door and looked down the hallway, he was paralyzed with terror. Outside, at the window, was an extremely pale woman, her eyes closed, tapping the glass with a twisted, long finger. She seemed to be searching for something or someone, and the way her fingers moved against the glass suggested infinite patience and disturbing determination. The student froze in fear, unable to believe what he was seeing. After a few seconds, he let out a scream of pure terror and ran away, leaving the library door open behind him. At that moment, the woman raised her fist and, with a violent strike, shattered the glass of the window. The sound of the glass falling to the floor echoed through the hallways, and shortly after, all the lights in the school went out. Sunri, who was still in the bathroom, noticed the blackout and initially thought it was a prank by her friends. But the silence that followed was too strange, as if the school itself was holding its breath. When she came out of the bathroom, still annoyed and ready to scold her friends, she encountered a horrifying scene. The library had turned into a nightmare. All her friends were dead on the floor, their bodies scattered bizarrely as if they had been thrown with great force around the room. There was blood everywhere, running over the books and tables, forming dark pools. Sunri was paralyzed, fear taking over her body as she tried to understand what was happening. Desperate, Sunri dropped to the floor, trembling with terror. That's when she heard footsteps echoing down the hallway, getting closer and closer. She knew that whatever was out there was coming toward the library. Not knowing what to do, she lay down among her friends' bodies, trying to blend in with them, closing her eyes tightly and praying that the thing wouldn't find her. The footsteps continued to get closer, accompanied by a disturbing whisper, 1, 2, 1, 2. Sunri could barely breathe from fear, her heart racing uncontrollably. After what seemed like an eternity of silence, Sunri, still trembling, mustered the courage to open her eyes. But what she saw was even worse. Right in front of her, so close she could smell the rot, was the pale woman with completely empty eyes and a distorted smile on her face. 1, 2, the woman muttered before clawing her long, cold fingers into Sunri's eyes, tearing them out in one pull. The pain was unbearable, and the last sound Sunri heard was the crunching of her friend's bones being crushed. It is believed that the spirit of the woman without eyes still roams the school, looking for new eyes to steal, and no one dares to stay there alone after dark. Around the year 2010, headphones started to become a trend in South Korea. Everyone was walking the streets with their MP3s and MP4s, listening to music while studying, working, or just strolling. Music seemed to be an escape from the real world, a way to isolate oneself from the daily routine. But that's when strange stories started to emerge about people who simply disappeared while wearing headphones. It was said that some kidnappers were taking advantage of people distracted by their music in dark streets. One of these stories became very famous. They say a girl named Mi Jin was walking calmly down a deserted street with her headphones on, completely immersed in the music. She had the habit of turning the volume up high to block out the city sounds. She liked to lose herself in her favorite songs while walking home. Suddenly, a car stopped next to her, but she didn't notice anything because the volume was too loud. The kidnappers dragged her into the car without giving her time to react. Hours later, the car returned to the same place where they had captured her, but when they released her, something was missing. The kidnappers had cut off her as the elevator ascended to the 14th floor. Yuni's panic escalated. She frantically pressed all the buttons in an attempt to stop the elevator, but it ignored her commands. When the doors finally opened on her floor, her heart nearly stopped. The young man was waiting there, holding a knife and smiling with a cold, sinister glee, as if he had been waiting for this moment. Yuni was never seen again after that night. The legend says that her body was never found. Following the incident, emergency stop buttons were installed in elevators throughout Korea, giving people a chance to escape if faced with a similar threat. Yet, many believe Yuni was not the first victim of this predator, and that he continues to lurk in elevators at night. To this day, many Koreans are wary of using elevators alone after dark, and the sight of an emergency stop button brings back memories of the unsettling legend. This legend centers around a young Korean woman named Sujin, who became obsessed with the idea of aging. Though in her 20s, she was haunted by the appearance of her first wrinkles. Her distress led her to try various products to maintain her youthful appearance, but nothing worked as she hoped. One day, a friend suggested an unusual remedy, filling a bathtub with sesame seeds and soaking in it. According to the friend, the seeds had miraculous properties for the skin, a remedy she'd heard from a healer in a remote village. Desperate, Sujin bought a large quantity of sesame seeds and filled her bathtub with them. She immersed herself, believing this would solve her problem. Hours passed, and Sujin's family grew concerned when she didn't come out of the bathroom. They knocked on the door, but Sujin insisted she needed more time. Eventually, her mother, now worried, broke down the door and discovered a horrifying scene. Sujin was alive but covered in sesame seeds that had begun to root into her skin. The seeds, which were meant to be a beauty treatment, had become parasitic, embedding themselves in her pores. Panicking, Sujin tried to remove the seeds with a toothpick and tweezers, but the more she removed, the more she bled. The seeds seemed fused with her skin, causing her immense pain and turning the bathroom into a blood-soaked nightmare. Sujin became obsessed with removing the seeds, spending days in the bathroom, causing more harm to herself. The legend says Sujin never recovered from the ordeal. Her obsession with staying youthful turned into a life of suffering, and she isolated herself, hiding from the world. The story serves as a warning against the dangers of vanity and the lengths some will go to avoid aging. Some claim that on nights with a full moon, you can still hear the sound of tweezers and toothpicks in her abandoned house, as Sujin continues her futile struggle. In Korea, dreaming of deceased individuals is considered a bad omen. One well-known story involves a young man named Hun, who began having troubling nightmares about his late grandmother. Despite being deeply affected by her death, Hun's dreams were disturbing. He saw her from afar, always calling to him but never entering the room. As the room filled with water in his dreams, he would wake up gasping. Initially, Hun thought the dreams were just a manifestation of his grief. However, when the dreams continued, he grew worried and shared his concerns with his wife, June. She informed him of an old Korean belief. If you dream of a deceased person 3 times, it signifies that you are about to die and that the deceased is coming to take you. Frightened, Hun began avoiding sleep, but exhaustion eventually took over. Desperate, he and June sought help from a spiritual expert who identified an old mirror belonging to his grandmother as the source of the nightmares. They buried the mirror near her grave, and the nightmares ceased, bringing Hun some peace. However, the legend has a darker side. If you dream 3 times of someone you've never met, but who seems familiar, it could signify that this person is destined to cause your death. This unsettling idea leaves many Koreans on high alert, wondering if their dreams might be warning them of impending danger. It serves as a reminder to pay attention to dreams and be cautious, as the familiar stranger in your dreams might be a harbinger of something sinister. In Korea, there's a belief that we may encounter dangerous individuals without realizing it. This legend revolves around Minho, a young man who began experiencing unsettling dreams about a person he'd never seen before, but who seemed strangely familiar. The person in his dreams simply watched him with a blank expression, causing Minho to feel an increasing sense of unease. Minho initially dismissed the dreams as stress-related, but grew increasingly paranoid when the same dream recurred. He learned of a legend that if you dream 3 times of a stranger, it signifies that this person is somehow linked to your destiny in a sinister way, possibly indicating someone who will cause your death. Obsessed with the idea that the stranger from his dreams might be connected to his demise, Minho became paranoid and avoided leaving his house. He scrutinized every stranger he encountered, fearing they might be the one from his nightmares. The constant anxiety affected his mental health, leading him to isolate himself from friends and family. The legend's implication that a dream might foreshadow an inevitable encounter with a dangerous person kept Minho in a state of perpetual fear. To this day, many Koreans are cautious about the people they meet, reflecting on whether they've encountered someone from their nightmares. It's a reminder to be vigilant and consider that familiar faces in dreams might hold more significance than initially thought. You've explored some of Korea's chilling urban legends. If you're still hungry for more, Japan offers a wealth of terrifying stories featuring vengeful spirits and ancient curses. Check out our special playlist for the most frightening Japanese legends. Just remember, listening late at night might lead to unexpected scares. See you there.